The Zelkarn descended without warning. Their warships, vast and angular, darkened the sky over major cities, blotting out the sun with the weight of their presence. Humanity barely had time to register their arrival before the slaughter began. Orbital bombardments reduced defenses to ash, and the once proud armies of Earth found themselves overrun by creatures who moved like machines but hunted like beasts. The invasion wasn't a battle, it was an extermination. Yet, deep in the Rockies, a handful of survivors remained. They weren't ordinary men. They were the kind that history had forged in fire, soldiers, survivalists, and warriors who understood that war was never about strength alone. It was about adaptation, about turning the enemy's arrogance into their downfall. Captain Sam Walker knelt in the underbrush, eyes scanning the valley below. The Zelkarn patrol moved in tight formation, their exoskeletal armor gleaming under the cold moonlight. They carried plasma rifles, sleek and deadly, weapons that had reduced whole battalions to charred remains. But Walker saw something else, their pattern, their predictability. These creatures, despite their might, had never fought an enemy like humans before. A slow breath. He turned to the others. "Looks like a standard patrol, 5 in total," he whispered. His voice was calm, measured. "They're moving like they expect resistance, but not from something they fear." "That's a mistake." Dante Ruiz, a former Marine Scout sniper, adjusted the scope on his rifle. It was an old bolt-action, a relic compared to the enemy's technology. But in the right hands, it was death. "They got weak points?" he asked. Walker nodded. "Joints in the armor. Neck seam, just beneath the mandibles. They're big, but they drop if you hit the right spot." Across from him, Jackson Cole, ex-Green Beret, demolition expert, grinned. "So they're just bigger deer?" Walker smirked. "Something like that." In the dirt beside them, Eli Carter, a former Air Force combat engineer, sketched a rough outline in the dust. "We take out the patrol. We get their weapons. We learn what makes them tick." Ruiz chambered around. "Then let's get started." They moved like ghosts through the underbrush, their steps precise, measured. The Zelkarn had superior numbers, superior firepower, but they lacked the instincts that had kept humanity alive through countless wars. They had never hunted something that hunted back. Ruiz was the first to strike. His rifle cracked, the suppressed shot slicing through the night. The lead alien staggered, a hole punched clean through its throat. It collapsed, twitching, as the others snapped into formation, their plasma rifles sweeping the terrain. Walker was already moving, a combat knife in hand. He closed the distance before they could react. His blade found the seam beneath another Zelkarn's jaw, twisting deep before he wrenched it free. The creature gurgled, dark ichor spilling onto the forest floor. Cole and Carter opened fire with scavenged rifles, bullets peppering the remaining aliens. One dropped, its carapace failing against concentrated fire. Another turned, raising its weapon, only for Ruiz's second shot to tear through its skull. The last one tried to flee. It made it 3 steps before Walker tackled it to the ground, pinning it beneath his knee. It screeched, mandibles clicking wildly. Walker pressed his knife to its throat. "Welcome to Earth." The creature struggled, but Walker tightened his grip. "You're gonna tell us everything." It snarled in its guttural language, but its fear was unmistakable. These humans weren't running. They weren't cowering. They were fighting back. And worse, they were learning. Hours later, around the fire, the group took stock of what they had gained. The Zelkarn's weapons were advanced but not invincible. The plasma rifles had a charge cycle, meaning they weren't as limitless as the aliens acted. Their armor, while strong, had weaknesses. "We hit them hard, fast, and from where they don't expect," Walker said, holding up the aliens' communicator. "They think we're scattered prey. That's the only reason we're still alive." Ruiz smirked. "Then we make him rethink that." Cole tossed another log onto the fire. "So what's the plan, Cap?" Walker looked at the captured alien, still bound and seething. "We start small. We hit patrols. We take their gear. And we learn. We turn their technology into ours." His eyes burned with something fierce. "They came here thinking we were animals. It's time we show them what kind." Above them, The night sky still burned with the remnants of fallen cities. But down here, in the dark, something else was taking shape. A hunt. And it had only just begun. The plasma rifle hissed as Carter pried open its casing, exposing a network of glowing conduits and alien circuitry. He wiped sweat from his brow. Eyes narrowed as he traced the lines of unfamiliar tech with practiced precision. The Zelkarn had built their weapons to be sleek, efficient, but not foolproof. And Carter, an engineer with a knack for making things work when they shouldn't, was determined to prove it. Walker crouched beside him, studying the disassembled weapon. "You figure out how it works yet?" Carter exhaled sharply. "Yeah, it's got a charge cycle, just like we thought. Fires in bursts. Needs to cool between shots. But here's the kicker." He pointed to a small, pulsing core embedded near the trigger assembly. "This thing regulates the plasma output. Without it, the rifle's just a fancy club." Walker frowned. "And if we tweak it?" Carter grinned. "Might be able to overclock it. More power, but higher risk of overload. We could turn these into handheld cannons or bombs." Cole let out a low whistle. "Now that's my kind of thinking." Ruiz, ever the pragmatist, leaned back against a tree. "Great, but we still need a way to test it without blowing ourselves up." The answer came sooner than expected. A low, mechanical hum echoed through the valley, followed by the unmistakable march of armored boots. Another patrol. Bigger this time, 7, maybe 8. The Zelkarn had noticed their missing scouts. Walker motioned for silence. The group melted into the underbrush, weapons primed. The ambush had to be perfect. The aliens moved with rigid precision, scanning the forest with cold efficiency. They weren't underestimating their enemy anymore, but they still weren't prepared. Carter held his breath as he pressed the modified rifle's trigger. The weapon whined, energy surging through the overclocked core. Then, with a sound like ripping air, a bolt of searing blue plasma erupted, striking the lead Zelkarn center mass. The blast tore through its armor, sending it sprawling with a smoking hole in its chest. For a fraction of a second, the patrol hesitated, just long enough for Ruiz to put a bullet through another skull. Then the fight erupted in full. Cole hurled a scavenged alien grenade, the compact device detonating with a concussive blast that sent 2 more enemies flying. Walker charged, moving like a shadow through the chaos, knife flashing as he carved through an exposed throat. The last 3 Zelkarn fell back, clearly rattled. They had fought humans before, but not like this. Not men who turned their own weapons against them. Not hunters who struck with precision and disappeared before retaliation could land. One of the creatures fumbled with a communicator, likely calling for reinforcements. Walker wasn't about to let that happen. He shot forward, closing the distance in an instant. His fist crashed into the alien's elongated skull, cracking the chitinous plating. The Zelkarn stumbled, reeling, as Walker ripped the device from its grasp and crushed it beneath his boot. The creature snarled, swiping with its razor-sharp claws. Walker ducked, pivoting low, before driving his combat knife into the alien's gut and twisting hard. It let out a choked gurgle before collapsing. The last 2 tried to flee. They didn't make it far. Ruiz's rifle cracked once. Twice. The forest fell silent. Carter exhaled, lowering his weapon. Overclocked rifle works. Didn't blow up. I call that a win. Cole clapped him on the back. Told you we'd make their toys better. Walker surveyed the battlefield, then turned to the bodies. Strip them. Every piece of gear we take gives us an edge. They moved quickly, harvesting weapons, armor, anything useful. The Zelkarn tech was advanced, but it wasn't invincible. And now it was in human hands. As they worked, Ruiz glanced at Walker. You know they're gonna send more. Walker nodded. Let 'em. We're learning just as fast as they are. Carter smirked. Faster. He held up a plasma core, still humming with contained energy. A wicked gleam sparked in his eyes. And I think I just figured out how to make us a real surprise. Walker grinned. Then let's get to work. The hunt wasn't over. It had only just begun. The stolen Zelkarn communicator crackled with static, its alien symbols flickering against the screen. Carter crouched over it, fingers working meticulously to override the security protocols. He had already figured out the basics, frequency modulation, encryption layers, but cracking the command network required a deeper understanding. The Zelkarn operated on a rigid hierarchy, and if they could exploit that, Walker leaned in, watching the engineer work. "How close are we?" Carter exhaled through his nose. "Almost there. These things are built like they never expected anyone to hack them." His fingers paused over a flashing glyph, then pressed down. The device emitted a sharp chirp. Carter's lips curled into a grin. "And we're in." The communicator flared to life, a garbled voice bleeding through the static. It wasn't human, harsh, guttural, the clicking tones of an alien commander. Carter tapped a dial, isolating the signal. Ruiz adjusted his rifle, scanning the trillion. "Tell me we just got something useful." Carter nodded. "Better than useful. We've got their patrol routes, supply drops, and," his eyes widened, "a base. 5 clicks west. Heavily fortified. But if we hit it right, we could rip their whole operation apart." Cole let out a low whistle. "You're talking about a direct assault. With what? Some scavenged rifles and a few grenades." Walker smirked. "With strategy." The Zelkarn had superior numbers, better weapons, and technological dominance. But they were predictable. They followed strict command structures, operated in rigid formations, and relied on centralized coordination. If they lost communication, if their leadership fractured, they wouldn't know how to adapt. Walker's team thrived on adaptation. He traced a rough map in the dirt. "We don't hit the base head-on. We sabotage." "Carter, think you can reprogram one of those plasma cores?" Carter tapped his temple. "Already working on it." Walker nodded. "Good. We rig their generators to overload. Take out their defenses before they even know we're there." He turned to Ruiz. "You get in position with the rifle. Take out their officers first. We turn their own chain of command into a weakness." Ruiz chambered around. "Easy." Walker's gaze flicked to Cole. "And you?" Cole grinned. "I make things go boom." They moved before dawn, slipping through the forest like wraiths. The Zelkarn base loomed ahead, a squat fortress of alien metal, pulsing with an eerie blue glow. Towering watchtowers scanned the perimeter, their mounted turrets humming with barely restrained energy. Ruiz took position on a ridge, rifle steady. Below, Carter and Cole crept toward the outer fence, slipping between shadows, moving with practiced efficiency. Carter crouched beside the generator, prying open its panel. The core pulsed within, a miniature sun encased in glass. He swapped a few key components, twisting a capacitor, just enough to destabilize the flow. The energy surged erratically, but the fail-safes held barely. Carter wiped his hands. 10 minutes, give or take. Cole planted his charges along the structural supports. Gonna be one hell of a light show. The first shot rang out clean and precise. Ruiz's bullet punched through the skull of a Zelkarn officer, sending its body crumpling to the ground. For a second, the base didn't react. Then the alarm wailed. Walker and Ruiz picked off sentries as chaos erupted. The Zelkarn scrambled, shouting orders, but without their commander. Their movements were disjointed, confused. Carter and Cole sprinted back as the generator's pulse became erratic, its glow intensifying. The first explosion ripped through the compound, a chain reaction of energy bursts igniting along the conduits. The turrets powered down, their defenses failing in an instant. Walker's team struck like wolves among cattle. Ruiz dropped another officer, Cole's explosives tore through a supply depot, and Carter hijacked their comms, feeding them misinformation. The Zelkarn faltered. Walker surged forward, cutting down the last of the resistance. The base lay in ruins, alien bodies sprawled across the ground. Smoke curled into the sky, a silent declaration of victory. Carter caught his breath, grinning. "We just wiped out their whole operation." Walker glanced toward the horizon. "No, we just got their attention." And that was exactly what they wanted. The Zelkarn were running. Walker watched through his binoculars as the remnants of the alien forces scrambled to evacuate their last command post on Earth. They had come as conquerors, arrogant and unchallenged. Now they were retreating, their formations broken, their discipline shattered. But retreat wasn't enough. Not yet. He lowered the binoculars and turned to his team. Ruiz sat on a fallen log, loading a fresh magazine into his rifle, expression calm, focused. Carter knelt beside a repurposed alien console, fingers flying over glowing symbols, rerouting stolen comms. Cole adjusted the straps on his pack, explosives secured tight. "They're pulling out," Walker said. "Final transport leaves in 1 hour. If they make it off-world, they'll regroup, reinforce, come back stronger." Ruiz set his rifle down. "Then we make sure they don't." Carter smirked, eyes locked on his screen. "I just got into their launch controls. Their ships run on centralized energy cells. If we overload them..." Cole cracked his knuckles. "They go boom." Walker nodded. "Exactly. We hit them before they leave, take out the command vessel, and send a message." They moved swiftly, using the ruins of the battlefield as cover. The Zelkarn transport base stretched before them, a sleek metallic structure housing towering warships, their dark hulls gleaming under artificial lights. Alien soldiers hurried along loading ramps, securing supplies, preparing for liftoff. Ruiz took his position on an elevated ridge, rifle steady. Walker, Carter, and Cole slipped into the shadows, weaving between abandoned crates and fallen structures. The plan was simple: sabotage the primary fuel cells, detonate the facility, and leave no survivors. Carter reached the first generator, working fast. His hands were steady despite the tension, rewiring the energy flow, setting the sequence for an overload. 2 minutes, he whispered. Ruiz's voice crackled over the radio. "Guards incoming." 3 heavily armed. Walker signaled for silence, motioning for Cole to hold. The Zelkarn patrol moved cautiously, scanning for threats. They knew humans were still out there. They just didn't know how close. Ruiz fired once. 1 alien crumpled. The other 2 spun. But before they could react, Walker was on them. A quick knife to the throat, a precise shot to the skull. They collapsed without a sound. Carter exhaled. "That's one way to handle it." "Focus," Walker said. "Timer." Carter checked the console. 30 seconds. The Zelkarn began final launch preparations. Their command ship loomed ahead, a towering behemoth of war. If it made it off the surface, Earth would never be safe. Walker raised his weapon. "We take that ship down." Cole grinned, gripping the detonator. With pleasure. The explosives detonated in a cascade of fire and light. The fuel cells ruptured, sending a shockwave tearing through the facility. Zelkarn soldiers screamed as the blast engulfed them, their towering warship splitting apart mid-launch, raining molten debris across the battlefield. The remaining aliens broke, panic overtaking them. Walker surveyed the carnage, then spoke into his radio. "It's over." Silence. Then Ruiz chuckled. "Damn right it is." Carter let out a breath of relief. Cole watched the fire burn, shaking his head. "They thought they could take us." Walker stared at the wreckage, voice steady. "They never had a chance." Above them, the stars stretched vast and endless. The Zelkarn had come expecting easy prey. Instead, they had found something far worse. Predators. And the hunt was just beginning.